and we assure you of our fullest cooperation. Mr. President, at a time when the world is facing multiple challenges, there is renewed attention on the role of the United Nations in advancing international peace, security, and prosperity. However, never has skepticism about the United Nations' capacity to do so been higher, or the external environment less propitious for multilateralism. Nearly 7 decades of the work of the United Nations hold one simple lesson, and that is this: we are most successful when we adhere to the letter and spirit of the United Nations Charter, basing our decisions on the widest possible consent and balancing equitably the needs and responsibilities of nations at different stages and levels of development. In these 7 decades, the world has changed in fundamental ways. Asia and Africa are independent and resurgent. Countries are now not only more interdependent, but also face new and increasingly complex challenges. For multilateralism to remain relevant and effective in the future, multilateral institutions need to be reformed, and reformed urgently. The Security Council must be reformed and restructured to reflect current political realities. More developing countries should be included as both permanent and non-permanent members. Multilateral financial institutions should also enable an enhanced voice for developing countries in their decision-making structures. Multilateral efforts must guide our quest for peace and security wherever they are threatened, and the centrality and contribution of the United Nations system to development must be restored. These objectives, Mr. President, require the building of a new international consensus suited to our time and rooted in today's realities. It is only such a plan of action that will enable the United Nations to meet the twin tests of legitimacy and effectiveness and efficiency. Mr. President, we commend your choice for the theme of this session. Setting the stage for the post-2015 development agenda is especially important as we deal with the lingering global economic slowdown and continuing volatility in financial markets. These have imposed disproportionately heavy costs on developing countries and vulnerable groups within these countries. Growth and inclusive development are naturally important for all our countries. They require a supportive international economic environment, enhanced investment flows, including from multilateral development banks, transfer of technology, and an open multilateral trading regime. But the problems of over 1 billion people living in abject poverty around the world need to be attacked, and attacked more directly. Poverty remains a major political and economic challenge, and its eradication requires special attention and a new collective thrust. This priority should anchor the post-2015 development agenda, which should be shaped by the member states so that it enjoys the broadest possible support and acceptance. Mr. President, issues of peace, security, human rights, and governance are important and need to be addressed, but we will fall short of realizing an ambitious post-2015 development agenda if we focus merely on governance issues at the cost of robust economic growth. This agenda should not be merely about reprioritizing domestic spending, but also about fostering genuine international partnerships between developing and developed countries to bring about change. All of us need the policy space necessary to set our own domestic priorities. No one knows the condition of developing countries better than the developing countries themselves. It is therefore important that the United Nations set clear and concise goals and provide practical and well-defined means of implementation, including adequate flow of resources and transfer of technology, taking the views of developing countries fully into account. A meaningful post-2015 agenda must place equally high priority on food and nutrition, health, education, infrastructure, water, sanitation, energy, and discrimination against women. Especially critical is women's equal access to economic opportunities and that they do not become victims of violence or targets of prejudice. In India, Mr. President, we have sought to promote inclusive development in multiple ways. Legislation has broadened access to education and secured rural livelihoods. We are now building in the world's largest program for food security. Digital technology is being harnessed to improve the delivery of public services and benefits to the people. Mr. President, India is proud of its partnerships with developing countries. Using modest resources, we have built strong ties with Africa and the least developed countries. We are committed to building 100 institutions in Africa, have offered capacity building support, including thousands of scholarships, and made available concessional assistance of over $9.5 billion. India and Africa are engaging through the India-Africa Forum Summit process. We also look forward to participating actively in the third conference on the small island developing states in Samoa in 2014 and contributing to its outcome. Mr. President, climate change is one of the defining challenges of our times. We must summon the necessary political will for crafting a robust global response to climate change on the basis of equity and the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Mr. President, sir, we are deeply concerned about the future of West Asia, a region with which India shares deep bonds of history and one that is critical for our energy security as well as the livelihood of nearly 7 million Indians who work and live in the region. The increasingly lethal conflict in Syria is not only a tragedy for the people of Syria, but also threatens stability and security in the region and beyond. It has been made worse by the use of chemical weapons. The use of chemical weapons, whosoever may have deployed them, must be condemned in the strongest possible terms. India supports strongly the elimination of chemical weapon material and equipment in Syria. There is no military solution to this conflict. We must intensify efforts to end the conflict and seek a political settlement. It is essential that the Geneva II conference be convened at the very earliest. Mr. President, we are encouraged that direct talks have resumed between Israel and Palestine. India supports an early realization of a sovereign, independent, viable and united state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living within secure and recognized borders side by side and at peace with Israel. We also remain committed to the Palestinian quest for full membership of the United Nations. In our own region, Afghanistan prepares for a historic political, security and economic transition. The international community must support the people of Afghanistan through this transition and beyond in combating terrorism, preserving the progress of the past decade, and creating a stable, united and prosperous Afghanistan. Mr. President, terrorism remains a grave threat to security and stability everywhere and exacts a heavy toll of innocent lives around the world. From Africa to Asia, we have seen several manifestations of this menace in the last few days alone. State-sponsored cross-border terrorism is of particular concern to India, also on account of the fact that the epicenter of terrorism in our region is located in our neighborhood in Pakistan. Speaking from this podium yesterday, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan spoke of making a new beginning. I reciprocate his sentiments and am looking forward to meeting him tomorrow. India is committed sincerely to resolving all issues with Pakistan, including the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, through bilateral dialogue on the basis of the Shimla Agreement. However, for progress to be made, it is imperative that the territory of Pakistan and the areas under its control are not utilized for aiding and abetting terrorism directed against India. It is equally important that the terrorist machinery that draws its sustenance from Pakistan be shut down. There must be a clear understanding of the fact that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India and that there can never ever be a compromise with the unity and territorial integrity of India. Mr. President, we need to renew our commitment, especially here at the United Nations, for concerted, cohesive and continuing global action against terrorism. There can be no tolerance for state sheltering, arming, training or financing terrorists, nor can they absolve themselves of the responsibility to prevent their territories from being used to launch acts of terrorism. Mr. President, the increasingly complex challenges to international peace and security require a new international consensus to be built, whether it is in the field of cyber security, non-proliferation, or terrorism. This year, 25 years after Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi put forward a comprehensive action plan for a nuclear weapon-free and non-violent world order, we must strengthen efforts against nuclear proliferation and pursue time-bound, universal, non-discriminatory, phased and verifiable nuclear disarmament. We must also guard against terrorists and non-state actors gaining access to sensitive materials and technologies. Mr. President, 2 years from now, the United Nations will be 70 years old. Every new state that was born during this period of 70 years took its
तो इस वक्त की बड़ी खबर, संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा की बैठक में प्रधानमंत्री ने आतंकवाद पर कड़ा रुख अख्तियार करते हुए साफ कहा कि पाकिस्तान आतंकवाद का गढ़ है, एपिसेंटर है। प्रधानमंत्री ने नवाज शरीफ की पहल का स्वागत करते हुए कहा कि वो पाकिस्तान के साथ जम्मू कश्मीर समेत सभी मुद्दों पर बातचीत को तैयार हैं, बशर्ते पाकिस्तान अपनी जमीन पर आतंकवादी गतिविधियों पर रोक लगाए। साथ ही पाकिस्तानी निजाम से आतंकवाद को मिल रही मदद भी बंद की जाए। मनमोहन सिंह ने एक बार फिर इस बात को दोहराया कि जम्मू कश्मीर भारत का अभिन्न अंग है और इस मसले पर भारत कभी भी कोई समझौता नहीं करेगा। और इसके मायने क्या हैं, ये जानने के लिए चलते हैं अपने एग्जीक्यूटिव एडिटर मृत्युंजय कुमार झा के पास। लगातार भारतीय विदेश नीति पर वो पिछले 20-22 सालों से नजर बनाए हुए हैं। एमके, जो आज प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा है पाकिस्तान को आतंक का गढ़ कहा है, कश्मीर को अभिन्न हिस्सा बताया है, साथ ही साथ शिमला समझौते के तहत बातचीत की पहल को भी वो स्वागत कर रहे हैं, लेकिन यह बात कह रहे हैं कि नहीं, पाकिस्तान को अपनी सभी आतंकवादी हरकतें और आतंकवाद को समर्थन बंद करना पड़ेगा। क्या पुरानी बातें हैं या एक कदम आगे बढ़ते दिख रहे हैं प्रधानमंत्री मनमोहन सिंह?
देखिए संदीप, ऐसा है कि ठीक से अब से मैं कहूंगा 24 घंटे बाद कल उनकी नवाज शरीफ से द्विपक्षीय मुद्दों पर बातचीत होने वाली है। और कल जो बीत गया, नवाज शरीफ ने यूएन के मंच पर यह कहा था कि वो बातचीत करने के लिए बातचीत करना चाहते हैं, भारत के साथ बातचीत करना चाहते हैं। और उन्होंने ये भी कहा था, उन्होंने अलग से एक बार फिर से केक राग यानी कश्मीर का राग उन्होंने फिर एक बार से छेड़ा था। तो ये उम्मीद की जा रही थी कि आज भी प्रधानमंत्री मनमोहन सिंह उनका जवाब देंगे, जैसा कि उन्होंने दिया। साफ साफ दो चीजों पर उन्होंने जो उसको अंडरलाइन किया। पहली चीज उन्होंने कहा कि वो कश्मीर सहित सारे मुद्दों पर बातचीत करना चाहते हैं, बशर्ते उन्होंने अपने भाषण में ही जब उन्होंने शुरुआत की, खास करके टेररिज्म वाले चैप्टर पर साफ साफ